The elegant notes of Chopin's Nocturne drifted through the marble corridors of the Swiss embassy, but Ambassador Whitfield had no idea that each deliberate pause, each subtle tempo change, was positioning a sniper's crosshairs 300 yards away. To everyone who passed the grand piano in the embassy's reception hall, Elena Vasquez was simply the quiet pianist who provided sophisticated background music for diplomatic gatherings. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The morning light filtered through the embassy's towering windows as Elena arrived at 5:47 a.m., exactly 17 minutes before the security shift change. Her footsteps on the polished marble floor followed a pattern that appeared random, but never varied by more than 6 inches from her established route. She carried a worn leather satchel containing sheet music that looked perfectly ordinary to casual observers, though a trained eye might notice the unusual pencil markings scattered throughout the compositions. Elena's fingers moved across the piano keys with surgical precision, warming up with scales that seemed routine but served a deeper purpose. Each exercise tested the acoustic properties of the room, measuring how sound traveled through the building's architecture. She noted the slight echo from the eastern wall, where construction had recently reinforced the structure, adjusting her mental calculations for how vibrations would carry through the building's framework. The embassy staff filtered in gradually, their conversations creating a familiar soundtrack of diplomatic routine. Elena observed each person's arrival time, their walk-in patterns, their preferred seating arrangements during meetings. To them, she was invisible furniture, as much a part of the building's elegant atmosphere as the crystal chandeliers or Persian rugs. They discussed sensitive matters freely around her, assuming that a musician possessed neither the interest nor the ability to understand the complexities of international relations. Security personnel had long since stopped questioning Elena's early arrival or her habit of testing the piano's acoustics with unusual chord progressions. Her background check had revealed nothing more interesting than a modest music degree from a state university and 15 years of experience performing at hotels and private events. The file made no mention of the 3 additional languages she spoke fluently, or the fact that she could calculate wind speed and trajectory adjustments by analyzing how sound behaved in different atmospheric conditions. Elena's sheet music collection appeared to be an eclectic mix of classical pieces, jazz standards, and contemporary compositions suitable for various diplomatic occasions. Hidden within the standard notation were microscopic markings that would be meaningless to any musician but carried precise tactical information for someone trained to read between the lines. A slight extension mark above a quarter note indicated wind direction. A barely visible accent mark below a rest conveyed distance measurements. Tempo markings that seemed slightly unusual to classical purists contained elevation data accurate to the centimeter. The leather satchel also contained items that served dual purposes. A silver metronome helped maintain precise timing during performances, but its internal mechanism had been modified to receive encrypted radio transmissions on frequencies that officially did not exist. A small humidifier designed to protect expensive sheet music from damage also monitored atmospheric pressure and humidity levels with laboratory precision. Even her tuning fork, made from a specialized alloy, could detect subtle vibrations through solid surfaces that indicated movement in adjacent buildings. Elena's performance schedule aligned perfectly with the embassy's security protocols, though no one had ever made that connection explicitly. During high-risk diplomatic meetings, she invariably chose pieces that required her to face specific windows, providing optimal sightlines for surveillance purposes. Her repertoire included compositions that naturally incorporated pauses at crucial moments, creating opportunities for careful observation and silent communication with assets positioned throughout the embassy district. Her apartment, located precisely 12 minutes from the embassy, by the route she had memorized in both directions, reflected the same careful attention to dual functionality. Music stands doubled as equipment storage. A collection of international sheet music served as reference materials for cultural intelligence gathering. The baby grand piano that dominated her living room had been acoustically modified to serve as a testing ground for the compositions she would later perform at the embassy. Elena maintained relationships with other musicians throughout the diplomatic community, attending concerts and recitals that provided opportunities to gather intelligence, while appearing to pursue normal professional networking. Her reputation as a dedicated artist who preferred to focus on her music rather than politics made her an ideal confidant for lonely diplomats, wives who found embassy life isolating. They shared information freely with someone they perceived as harmless and discreet. The morning routine never varied, even on weekends when the embassy operated with minimal staff. Elena arrived, performed her acoustic tests, arranged her sheet music according to a system that appeared organizational, but actually corresponded to current threat levels and operational requirements. She cleaned the piano with specialized cloths that served double duty as signal flags when positioned in specific windows. Her water bottle, always placed at the same angle on the piano's music stand, contained liquid that would reveal chemical residues if anyone attempted to tamper with her instrument. Other embassy personnel had grown accustomed to Elena's perfectionist tendencies, the way she insisted on testing every key before beginning her actual performance schedule. They attributed her methodical approach to artistic temperament rather than tactical necessity. The security staff appreciated her reliability and the fact that her music created an atmosphere of cultured sophistication that impressed visiting dignitaries. Elena's financial records showed modest earnings consistent with her official position, but careful analysis would reveal a complex network of investment accounts and charitable contributions that served as funding mechanisms for operations that left no paper trail. Her tax returns listed income from private music lessons that never actually took place and royalties from compositions that existed only as cover stories for more sensitive activities. The embassy's grand piano had been selected specifically for its placement in the building's acoustic center, where sound traveled most efficiently to all floors and wings. Elena had spent weeks learning the instrument's unique characteristics, how each key responded to different pressures, which pedal combinations produced sounds that would mask other frequencies. She could play compositions that would cover the sound of footsteps in the corridor above or create harmonic interference that would disrupt electronic surveillance equipment. As morning meetings commenced and the embassy filled with the purposeful energy of diplomatic work, Elena transitioned from her preparation routine to active performance. Her first piece of the day was always carefully chosen based on intelligence received during her commute, encoded in the positioning of newspaper stands and the colors of flowers in shop windows along her route. Today's selection, a batch invention, in F major, would inform anyone listening through the proper channels that all systems were operational and ready for the day's mission parameters. The transformation was invisible to casual observers, but Elena Vasquez had just activated a communication network that stretched across 3 continents, beginning another day of service that officially did not exist. The elevator doors opened with mechanical precision, and Deputy Ambassador Hartwell stepped into the embassy's marble lobby, carrying a briefcase that contained the future of every non-essential position in the building. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished floor with the rhythm of a man accustomed to making decisions that others would have to live with. The sound interrupted Elena's morning performance of Debussy's Clair de Lune. Though she continued playing without missing a note, Hartwell paused near the reception desk, his gaze sweeping the ornate interior with the calculating efficiency of someone trained to identify redundancies and eliminate waste. His appointment as Deputy Ambassador had come with specific instructions from Washington regarding budget optimization and streamlined operations. The State Department's new efficiency initiative demanded a 20% reduction in operational costs, and ceremonial positions would be the first casualties. The piano music drew his attention, and Hartwell turned toward Elena with the expression of a man discovering an expensive decoration that served no functional purpose. He had spent the previous evening reviewing personnel files, and the musician's salary had appeared as a line item that seemed particularly vulnerable to elimination. In his experience, diplomatic missions succeeded through strategic negotiations and security protocol, and everything about this man's body language suggested he viewed her as a problem to be solved. She modulated her performance subtly, choosing phrases that would allow her to monitor his conversation with the embassy's administrative staff while appearing completely absorbed in her music. Hartwell's background check had revealed an impressive resume of diplomatic efficiency achievements. He had eliminated redundant positions at embassies in Prague and Buenos Aires, streamlining operations while improving security protocols. His methods were legendary within State Department circles for their thoroughness and complete disregard for sentimental attachments to traditional diplomatic customs. Personnel files became statistical abstractions, and budget items were evaluated purely on measurable contributions to mission objectives. The morning staff briefing began 30 minutes later in the embassy's conference room, where Hartwell presented his preliminary assessment of operational inefficiencies. Elena could hear fragments of conversation through the building's acoustic properties, though to anyone observing her, she appeared focused entirely on practicing a challenging passage from Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The irony was not lost on her that she was using advanced auditory surveillance techniques while being dismissed as a decorative expense. During the coffee break, Hartwell approached the piano for the first time. His inspection was cursory but pointed, examining the instrument as if calculating its resale value rather than appreciating its craftsmanship. Elena continued her practice session, allowing him to observe her technique while internally cataloging every detail about his appearance, mannerisms, and the way he positioned himself relative to potential exit routes. "Impressive instrument," Hartwell commented, though his tone suggested he found nothing impressive about the situation. "Custom-made, I assume. Probably cost more than most diplomatic vehicles." Elena's response was measured and professional. Exactly what someone in her official position should offer. She explained the piano's acoustic properties and its importance for hosting cultural events that enhance the embassy's diplomatic effectiveness. Hartwell's questions revealed his complete misunderstanding of how soft power operations functioned within diplomatic missions. He viewed cultural programming as expensive window dressing rather than strategic asset development. His experience in corporate consulting before joining the diplomatic service had taught him to measure value through immediate, quantifiable results rather than long-term relationship building that might take years to demonstrate return on investment. The conversation attracted attention from other embassy staff, who began gathering around the piano with the nervous energy of employees, watching their colleague being evaluated for elimination. Elena recognized the dynamic immediately and adjusted her responses to sound appropriately defensive while providing no useful information about her actual capabilities or the strategic value of her position beyond surface level. Cultural enhancement. Administrative. Officer Sarah Chun attempted to intervene on Elena's behalf, citing positive feedback from visiting dignitaries who had specifically mentioned the embassy's sophisticated cultural atmosphere. Her arguments fell on deaf ears as Hartwell explained his mandate to eliminate positions that could not demonstrate direct correlation to diplomatic mission success. Music, in his assessment, fell into the category of luxury amenities that modern diplomatic operations could no longer afford. Elena's performance throughout this interrogation was flawless, presenting exactly the image of a dedicated artist whose primary concerns centered on maintaining proper piano tuning and selecting appropriate repertoire for different types of diplomatic events. She mentioned her music education background and her efforts to choose culturally sensitive pieces that would appeal to visitors from various international backgrounds. Nothing in her demeanor suggested capabilities beyond those listed in her official personnel file. The security briefing that followed included Elena's position on a list of budget line items under review for potential elimination. Hartwell's presentation emphasized the need to focus resources on personnel with clearly defined security or negotiation responsibilities. Cultural programming, he argued, could be outsourced to local musicians on an as-needed basis, eliminating the expense of a full-time position with benefits and security clearance requirements. Embassy security. Chief Robert Martinez raised concerns about the background check process for temporary cultural contractors, but Hartwell dismissed these objections as evidence of bureaucratic resistance to necessary modernization. His confidence in his assessment was absolute, backed by successful implementation of similar measures at previous postings. He had never encountered a situation where eliminating cultural positions had resulted in any significant operational difficulties. Elena continued practicing throughout these discussions, her musical selection serving dual purposes that none of the meeting participants could have imagined. The tempo changes and dynamic variations in her performance were transmitting real-time intelligence about the threat assessment and operational security implications of Hartwell's arrival. 300 yards away, her information was being received and processed by assets, who would begin implementing protective protocols before the embassy staff finished their morning coffee. The day's schedule included a private meeting between Hartwell and Ambassador Williams regarding the efficiency initiative's implementation timeline. Elena's position would be among the first to be formally eliminated, serving as an example of the Deputy Ambassador's commitment to fiscal responsibility. The decision had already been made. The meeting was merely a procedural formality to ensure proper documentation for State Department review. Elena's lunch break provided an opportunity to transmit more detailed intelligence about the new threat to operational security. Her walk through the embassy district appeared routine, but included stops at locations that would allow her to communicate the changed circumstances and threat level assessment to monitoring stations throughout the city. The network that had operated seamlessly for 3 years would need to adapt quickly to maintain effectiveness under increased scrutiny. Hartwell spent his afternoon reviewing additional personnel files and operational budgets, preparing for a comprehensive presentation that would demonstrate his department's value to embassy efficiency. Elena's position represented the kind of obvious redundancy that would make his other recommendations appear more reasonable by comparison. He was completely confident that no one would seriously argue for maintaining a full-time pianist when diplomatic missions faced genuine budget constraints and security challenges. The trap had been set with bureaucratic precision, and Charles Hartwell believed he had identified the perfect target for demonstrating his commitment to fiscal responsibility and operational efficiency. The weekly embassy staff meeting began precisely at 2 o'clock, with Deputy Ambassador Hartwell positioning himself at the head of the polished conference table, like a general preparing to address troops before a decisive battle. Elena had been specifically requested to attend, an unusual directive since her position had never required participation in administrative discussions. She entered the room carrying her leather satchel and a folder of sheet music, maintaining the appearance of someone uncertain why a pianist would be needed at a budget review meeting. Ambassador Williams sat at Hartwell's right, her expression carefully neutral as she reviewed the efficiency proposal that would reshape embassy operations over the coming months. The other department heads arranged themselves around the table with the practiced precision of diplomatic professionals, though subtle glances toward Elena suggested they understood. She had been summoned as an example rather than a participant. Hartwell opened his presentation with statistics demonstrating budget pressures facing diplomatic missions worldwide. emphasizing the State Department's mandate for streamlined operations that focused exclusively on essential personnel. His PowerPoint slides revealed cost analysis data that reduced human resources to mathematical abstractions, with positions evaluated solely on quantifiable contributions to diplomatic objectives. Elena's salary appeared highlighted in red as the meeting's primary example of unnecessary expense. Cultural programming represents a luxury that modern diplomatic missions can no longer justify, Hartwell announced, directing his attention toward Elena with the confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. While we all appreciate artistic contributions to embassy atmosphere, taxpayer dollars must be allocated to personnel with clearly defined security and negotiation responsibilities. His tone suggested patient explanation of simple concepts. To someone too naive to understand fiscal realities, Elena maintained perfect posture throughout his opening remarks, her hands folded professionally while internally calculating the strategic implications of being publicly targeted for elimination. Her expression remained pleasantly attentive, exactly what would be expected from a musician who had suddenly found herself at the center of budget discussions she was presumably too unworldly to comprehend. Miss Vasquez, Hartwell continued, consulting his notes with theatrical precision, your position represents exactly the kind of ceremonial appointment that undermines embassy efficiency. Tell me, what measurable contributions has your musical programming provided to our diplomatic mission success? The question was designed to humiliate rather than genuinely seek information, crafted to expose the supposed inadequacy of her role. Before her colleagues, Security Chief Martinez shifted uncomfortably in his chair, recognizing the Deputy Ambassador's tactics from corporate consulting environments where public humiliation served as motivation for remaining employees. Administrative. Officer Chen glanced toward Ambassador Williams, hoping for intervention that did not materialize. The room's atmosphere grew tense as staff members realized they were witnessing an execution disguised as administrative review. Elena's response demonstrated perfect calibration of tone and content, presenting herself as dedicated, but perhaps naive about broader operational requirements. She mentioned the positive feedback from visiting dignitaries, the cultural sensitivity of musical selections for different international guests, and the embassy's reputation for sophisticated hospitality. Her answer provided exactly the kind of soft justification that Hartwell had anticipated and prepared to demolish with bureaucratic precision. Cultural sensitivity, Hartwell repeated, allowing contempt to color his pronunciation of the phrase. Ambassador Williams, how many diplomatic breakthroughs have resulted from piano music? How many security threats have been neutralized through Chopin performances? How many trade agreements have been negotiated because visitors enjoyed our atmospheric entertainment? His rhetorical questions echoed through the conference room like artillery rounds, each one designed to reduce Elena's contributions to absurdity. The Deputy Ambassador stood and approached the conference room's windows, gesturing toward the embassy district with the authority of someone who had successfully eliminated inefficiencies at multiple diplomatic postings. Real diplomatic work requires professionals trained in negotiation, security protocols, and international law. We cannot afford to maintain positions that exist solely to provide background music for cocktail parties that accomplish nothing beyond making ourselves feel sophisticated. Elena absorbed each verbal blow without visible reaction, though her peripheral awareness cataloged the defensive positioning of staff members, who were simultaneously relieved they were not under attack and uncomfortable witnessing their colleagues. Systematic destruction. Martinez's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Chen's fingers drummed silently against her folder. Even Ambassador Williams seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the public nature of Hartwell's performance. Perhaps you could explain, Hartwell continued, returning to his position at the head of the table with predatory satisfaction. What qualifications beyond basic musical training prepare you for work in a high-security diplomatic environment? What languages do you speak? What international experience do you possess? What crisis management training have you received? Each question was calculated to expose the supposed inadequacy of her background for embassy work. Elena's responses maintained perfect consistency with her official personnel file, acknowledging limited experience beyond music education and performance, while expressing dedication to learning about diplomatic protocol. She mentioned studying French and Spanish to better understand embassy visitors, carefully avoiding any indication of the advanced linguistic capabilities that would raise questions about her actual background and training. Hartwell's smile grew sharper as Elena's answers confirmed his expectations of someone hired through cultural connections rather than professional qualifications. Ladies and gentlemen, this is precisely what inefficient diplomatic operations look like. We employ musicians to provide entertainment while real threats require attention from qualified security professionals. We maintain cultural positions, while budget constraints force us to operate with inadequate intelligence gathering and threat assessment capabilities. The presentation continued with detailed analysis of Elena's salary and benefits package, compared unfavorably with the cost of hiring local musicians on a contract basis for specific events. Hartwell emphasized that eliminating her position would free resources for additional security personnel or intelligence analysts who could contribute meaningfully to embassy protection and diplomatic effectiveness. His arguments were mathematically precise and strategically devastating. Miss Vasquez, he announced with the finality of a judge delivering sentence, effective immediately, your position is eliminated as part of our efficiency optimization initiative. You will receive standard severance compensation and assistance with career transition services. The embassy will continue hosting cultural events using local contractors who can provide entertainment without the overhead costs of full-time employment and security clearance requirements. Elena accepted the termination with professional grace, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to serve at the embassy, while understanding the fiscal pressures facing diplomatic operations. Her response was perfectly calibrated to sound disappointed, but not bitter. Exactly what would be expected from someone who recognized that the reality of budget constraints, even while personally affected by them. The meeting concluded with Hartwell outlining additional efficiency measures that would be implemented over the coming weeks, using Elena's elimination as evidence of his commitment to meaningful reform. Department heads filed out with expressions ranging from relief at surviving the purge to discomfort at witnessing their colleagues' public destruction. Elena gathered her sheet music and leather satchel, preparing to clear out her workstation while maintaining the dignity appropriate to someone who had served faithfully despite lacking qualifications for high-level diplomatic work. Martinez approached her after the meeting, ostensibly to discuss security protocols for returning her embassy identification and accessing her personal items. His brief conversation included subtle expressions of regret disguised as administrative procedure, though nothing that would constitute criticism of official decisions. Elena thanked him for his courtesy and professionalism, giving no indication that his discomfort had been noted and filed away for future reference. As Elena walked through the embassy's marble corridors for what appeared to be the final time, her footsteps maintained the same precise pattern she had followed for 3 years. Her sheet music remained organized according to the system that looked random but actually corresponded to operational requirements that would continue regardless of her official employment status. The leather satchel still contained items that served purposes beyond musical performance, though these would need to be relocated before her access credentials were deactivated. Hartwell observed her departure from the conference room windows, satisfied with his successful demonstration of fiscal responsibility and strategic thinking. He had eliminated an obvious inefficiency while establishing his authority over embassy operations, creating momentum for additional reforms that would modernize diplomatic work according to private sector principles. The musician's termination had proceeded exactly as planned, with no complications or unexpected resistance from embassy staff. The deputy ambassador had no way of knowing that Elena Vasquez was already implementing protocols for continued operations under non-official cover, or that her elimination had just activated contingency plans that had been prepared for precisely this scenario. Lieutenant David Chen of Embassy Security had been watching Elena Vasquez for 3 days since her termination, not because he suspected her of wrongdoing, but because something about her dismissal felt fundamentally wrong in ways he could not articulate. Her final performance at the embassy had included musical phrases that seemed oddly familiar, though he could not place where he had heard similar patterns before. The precision of her technique suggested training that extended far beyond the modest music degree listed in her personnel file. Chen's background in military intelligence had taught him to notice inconsistencies that others missed, patterns that appeared random but followed hidden logic. Elena's sheet music had contained markings that looked like standard musical notation but included symbols he had never seen in classical compositions. During her final day, she had positioned certain pages at specific angles on the piano's music stand, creating what appeared to be random arrangements but felt deliberate in ways that triggered his professional instincts. The investigation began unofficially during Chen's evening review of embassy security footage from the previous month. Standard procedure required analysis of personnel movement patterns to identify potential security vulnerabilities, but Elena's recorded activities revealed behaviors that made no sense for a simple pianist. She consistently arrived at precise times that coincided with security shift changes. Her route through the building followed paths that provided optimal sight lines to all entrances and exits. And her practice sessions included acoustic tests that resembled communication protocols rather than musical preparation. Chen's initial queries into Elena's background were conducted through routine channels that would not attract attention from Deputy Ambassador Hartwell's ongoing efficiency review. Her official records showed consistent employment history, appropriate educational credentials, and financial statements that aligned perfectly with her reported income. Everything appeared legitimate until Chen began examining details that most background investigations overlooked as irrelevant to security clearance requirements. The music degree from Northwestern State University checked out completely, but Chen's conversation with the registrar revealed interesting gaps in the official story. Elena Vasquez had indeed graduated with distinction, but her academic advisor remembered her as someone whose musical knowledge seemed to extend far beyond the curriculum requirements. She had demonstrated familiarity with obscure international compositions and possessed perfect pitch abilities that typically required years of specialized training beginning in early childhood. Chen's military contacts provided access to databases that civilian investigators could not reach, revealing fragments of information that painted a very different picture of Elena's capabilities and background. Her financial records, examined more closely, showed investment patterns that suggested knowledge of international markets and economic indicators that would be unusual for someone whose career had focused exclusively on musical performance. Small deposits appeared at irregular intervals from sources that proved difficult to trace through standard banking investigations. The breakthrough came when Chen discovered Elena's apartment lease application from 3 years earlier. Her references included 2 individuals whose backgrounds, when investigated, revealed connections to private security firms that specialized in corporate intelligence gathering. The landlord remembered Elena as an ideal tenant who paid rent promptly and maintained the property immaculately, but who had specifically requested an apartment with sightlines to the embassy district and proximity to multiple transportation routes. Chen's examination of embassy security logs revealed patterns that had been invisible until viewed through the lens of potential covert activity. Elena's arrival and departure times corresponded, precisely with the schedules of visiting dignitaries whose presence at the embassy was not publicly announced. Her practice sessions often extended into evening hours when sensitive diplomatic meetings were conducted, positioning her to monitor acoustic information that should have been inaccessible to civilian personnel. The musical compositions Elena had performed during her final week contained elements that Chen's research revealed were based on traditional folk melodies from regions where the United States had conducted classified military operations over the past decade. Her repertoire included pieces that incorporated rhythmic patterns matching Morse code sequences, though disguised within classical arrangements that would sound perfectly normal to casual listeners. The precision required to embed communication protocols within musical performance suggested training that extended far beyond civilian music education. Chen's investigation expanded to include Elena's personal relationships and social connections throughout the diplomatic community. Her attendance at cultural events had provided opportunities to interact with embassy personnel from multiple nations, often in casual settings where security protocols were relaxed and sensitive information might be discussed more freely. Her reputation as a dedicated artist who preferred music to politics had made her an ideal confidant for diplomatic spouses who found embassy life isolating and restrictive. The most revealing discovery emerged from Chen's analysis of Elena's performance schedule during international crisis periods over the past 3 years. Her musical selections had consistently shifted to include compositions that allowed her to face specific windows and maintain visual contact with locations throughout the embassy district where unusual activity might indicate developing security threats. Her timing had been impeccable, with practice sessions scheduled to provide optimal observation opportunities during periods when intelligence suggested potential hostile surveillance. Chen's background check revealed that Elena's Social Security number had been issued during a period when the Social Security Administration was implementing new fraud prevention measures that made document verification more rigorous than previous years. Her credit history began exactly 3 years ago, with no prior financial records despite her claimed age of 32. The absence of earlier documentation could indicate identity theft, witness protection program participation, or something more sophisticated that required resources beyond typical criminal capabilities. The apartment search, conducted under the pretext of routine security verification for former embassy personnel, revealed additional inconsistencies that deepened Chen's suspicions about Elena's true identity and background. Her personal library included technical manuals on acoustic engineering and signal processing that would be far beyond the interests of a classical pianist. Hidden among standard sheet music were compositions written in her own hand that incorporated mathematical notations relating to trajectory, calculations, and atmospheric sound transmission properties. Chen discovered Elena's computer contained software programs designed for analyzing building acoustics and sound transmission characteristics that would be useful for surveillance or counter-surveillance operations. Her internet browsing history showed research into embassy security protocols and diplomatic protection procedures that seemed inappropriate for someone in her official position. Email communications revealed a network of contacts whose backgrounds, when investigated, showed connections to private security firms and international consulting companies. The most disturbing revelation came from Chen's analysis of embassy security incidents over the past 3 years. Every potential threat that had been identified and neutralized before reaching dangerous levels had occurred during periods when Elena was present at the embassy and positioned to observe suspicious activity. Her musical performance schedule had provided perfect cover for continuous surveillance of embassy approaches and monitoring of personnel behavior patterns that might indicate security compromises. Chen's investigation revealed that Elena's termination had been followed immediately by a significant increase in undetected security probes against embassy installations throughout the region. Intelligence reports indicated heightened activity from hostile foreign services that suggested they were testing defenses that had previously proven impenetrable. The correlation between her departure and increased threat activity could not be coincidental. The final piece of evidence emerged from Chen's examination of Elena's personal effects that had been left behind during her hurried departure from the embassy. A music stand contained hidden compartments accessible only through specific manipulation of adjustment mechanisms, revealing communication equipment that operated on frequencies reserved for classified government operations. The discovery confirmed Chen's growing suspicion that Elena Vasquez was not the simple pianist she had appeared to be. Cheng's investigation had uncovered evidence that the woman Hartwell had dismissed as a ceremonial appointment possessed capabilities and knowledge that suggested extensive training in intelligence gathering and covert operations. Her 3 years at the embassy had provided perfect cover for activities that had nothing to do with musical performance and everything to do with protecting diplomatic personnel from threats they never knew existed. The security chief now faced the uncomfortable reality that Deputy Ambassador Hartwell had eliminated someone whose actual value to embassy security was immeasurable, and whose departure had left critical vulnerabilities that hostile forces were already beginning to exploit. Chen's investigation took a dramatic turn when he discovered that Elena's departure from the embassy had not ended her surveillance activities. In the diplomatic district, 3 separate intelligence sources reported unusual acoustic phenomena near embassy buildings throughout the week following her termination, suggesting that her communication network remained operational despite her official dismissal. The realization that she was continuing her mission under non-official cover transformed Chen's inquiry from routine security verification into active counterintelligence investigation. The breakthrough came during Chen's examination of acoustic surveillance equipment that had been mysteriously malfunctioning since Elena's departure. Embassy security systems designed to detect unauthorized electronic surveillance had been registering intermittent signals that appeared to originate from musical instruments throughout the diplomatic quarter. Technical analysis revealed that these signals operated on frequencies that corresponded precisely to musical note intervals, disguised within the natural acoustic environment of the embassy district. Chen's team discovered that Elena had established communication protocols using a network of pianos located in hotels, restaurants, and cultural centers within a 3-mile radius of the embassy. Each instrument had been subtly modified to transmit encoded information through harmonic frequencies that would be indistinguishable from normal musical performance to anyone not specifically monitoring for covert communication. The sophistication of the system suggested resources and technical expertise far beyond what a civilian musician could access independently. The investigation revealed that Elena's musical performances had been coordinating defensive measures that had prevented 17 documented security threats over the past 3 years. Embassy personnel had attributed their exceptional safety record to enhanced security protocols and professional vigilance, never suspecting that their protection depended on a pianist's ability to encode tactical information within classical compositions. Each piece she performed had served multiple purposes, providing cultural atmosphere while simultaneously transmitting real-time intelligence to assets positioned throughout the embassy district. Chen's analysis of archived security footage revealed the true scope of Elena's surveillance network. Street musicians, wedding pianists, and hotel lobby performers throughout the diplomatic quarter had been unknowingly participating in an intelligence gathering operation that monitored every approach to embassy buildings. Their musical performances contained encoded information about personnel movements, vehicle patterns, and suspicious activities that would be invisible to conventional security measures. The network operated continuously, providing comprehensive coverage that no official intelligence service could match without attracting unwanted attention. The most shocking discovery emerged from Chen's examination of ballistic analysis reports from recent security incidents in neighboring diplomatic missions. Weapons seized during arrests of suspected terrorists contained modifications that suggested they had been sabotaged prior to operational deployment, rendering them ineffective at crucial moments when attacks might have succeeded. The sabotage patterns match technical specifications that would require expertise in precision, manufacturing, and intimate knowledge of weapon systems used by hostile forces. Chen's investigation uncovered evidence that Elena had been operating as part of a larger intelligence network that included individuals embedded throughout the international diplomatic community. Hotel concierges who noticed unusual guest behavior, restaurant servers who observed suspicious dining patterns, taxi drivers whose routes provided optimal surveillance opportunities, and maintenance workers with access to building infrastructure had all been reporting information that was analyzed and coordinated through musical communication protocols that Elena had established and maintained. The scope of the operation became clear when Chen discovered that Elena's sheet music contained mathematical notations that corresponded to sniper positioning data for protective overwatch throughout the embassy district. Each composition included calculations for wind speed, atmospheric pressure, and trajectory adjustments that would be necessary for accurate long-range fire support. The precision of the data suggested that Elena possessed advanced training in ballistic calculations and tactical coordination that was completely inconsistent with her official background as a classical pianist. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Chen's team identified at least 3 separate sniper positions that had been actively maintained throughout Elena's tenure at the embassy, with equipment caches and observation posts that could provide lethal fire support within minutes of receiving coded musical instructions. The positions were professionally established with escape routes, communication equipment, and supply stores that indicated long-term operational planning by someone with extensive military experience and access to classified intelligence about embassy security vulnerabilities. The investigation revealed that Elena's communication system had evolved far beyond simple information gathering into active threat neutralization capabilities. Analysis of her musical compositions showed that certain pieces contained embedded instructions for coordinated responses to specific types of security threats. A particular Beethoven sonata included timing sequences for simultaneous actions at multiple locations, while a Chopin nocturne provided detailed instructions for equipment, positioning, and tactical deployment that could be implemented without direct verbal communication. Chen discovered that Elena's network had been responsible for preventing a sophisticated assassination attempt against a visiting foreign minister 6 months earlier. The attack had been neutralized through coordinated action that appeared to result from exceptional security awareness and professional vigilance, but actually depended on intelligence gathered through musical surveillance and tactical response, coordinated through encoded piano performances. The would-be assassins had been arrested before reaching their target, never understanding that their every movement had been monitored and their weapons compromised by Elena's network. The most disturbing revelation emerged from Chen's analysis of Elena's continued activities following her termination from embassy employment. Surveillance teams reported she had established new performance venues throughout the diplomatic quarter, maintaining her intelligence gathering capabilities, while appearing to pursue normal career opportunities as a freelance musician. Her new positions provided even better access to sensitive locations and personnel, suggesting that her dismissal had actually enhanced rather than diminished her operational effectiveness. Chen's investigation uncovered evidence that Elena's musical training had been supplemented with advanced instruction in cryptography, tactical communication, and electronic surveillance that was completely absent from her official educational records. Her apartment contained technical manuals on signal processing and acoustic engineering that indicated graduate-level understanding of sound transmission principles. Hidden among her personal effects were devices for monitoring electromagnetic emissions and detecting surveillance equipment that would be restricted to military and intelligence applications. The network's sophistication became apparent when Chen discovered that Elena had been coordinating with assets positioned at diplomatic missions throughout the region, sharing intelligence about potential threats and coordinating defensive measures that protected American interests across multiple countries. Her musical performances had been transmitting information that allowed preventive action against terrorist plots, espionage operations, and assassination attempts that could have destabilized international relations throughout the region. Chen's team identified communication protocols that allowed Elena's network to operate independently of official intelligence channels, while providing information that supplemented and enhanced conventional security measures. Her musical performances had been encoding threat assessments, personnel evaluations, and tactical recommendations that were transmitted to decision-makers through channels that bypassed normal bureaucratic procedures. The system allowed for rapid response to developing threats without compromising operational security or revealing intelligence sources. The investigation revealed that Elena's departure from official embassy employment had triggered contingency plans that maintained network operations under even more sophisticated cover arrangements. Her new performance schedule provided access to previously unavailable intelligence sources while maintaining the communication protocols that had proven so effective during her official tenure. The network had actually expanded its capabilities following her termination, suggesting that her dismissal had been anticipated and prepared for through advanced planning. Chen discovered that Elena's intelligence network had been documenting security vulnerabilities throughout the diplomatic quarter that conventional assessments had failed to identify. Her unique position as a musician with access to multiple embassy buildings had allowed comprehensive analysis of defensive weaknesses and procedural gaps that could be exploited by hostile forces. The information she had gathered represented a complete intelligence picture of diplomatic security that no official service could have developed without compromising their own operational security. The most alarming discovery emerged from Chen's analysis of recent intelligence reports, indicating increased hostile activity throughout the region following Elena's departure from official embassy employment. Foreign intelligence services appeared to be testing defenses that had previously proven impenetrable, suggesting they had been waiting for Elena's network to be disrupted before implementing operations that had been impossible while her surveillance and defensive measures remained operational. Chen realized that Deputy Ambassador Hartwell's efficiency initiative had inadvertently eliminated the embassy's most effective security asset, leaving critical vulnerabilities that hostile forces were already beginning to exploit through operations that Elena's network would have detected and neutralized before they could develop into serious threats. Chen's classified database search revealed a name that should not have existed in any official records, yet appeared in fragments across multiple intelligence archives spanning 15 years of covert operations. Colonel Elena Vasquez, Strategic Intelligence Division, had been declared killed in action during a classified mission in Syria 8 years earlier. Her service record sealed under national security provisions that made further investigation impossible through normal channels. The photograph in her military file bore an unmistakable resemblance to the embassy pianist, though the woman in uniform possessed a hardness and authority that had been completely absent from Elena's civilian persona. The revelation sent Chen through secure intelligence networks that required clearance levels far above his current authorization, but his father's connections within naval intelligence provided access to classified briefings that painted a picture of extraordinary service and ultimate sacrifice. Colonel Vasquez had been one of the most decorated intelligence operatives in modern military history, credited with disrupting terrorist networks throughout the Middle East and preventing attacks that would have claimed thousands of American lives. Her specialization had been deep cover infiltration of extremist organizations, often spending months establishing identities that allowed her to access leadership structures and operational planning that conventional intelligence gathering could never penetrate. Elena's linguistic abilities extended to fluent Arabic, Farsi, and Turkish, with cultural knowledge so comprehensive that she could pass as a native speaker in regions where discovery meant immediate execution. Her mission success rate had been unprecedented. With 17 major terrorist plots neutralized through intelligence she had gathered while living among the enemy. The Syrian operation that officially ended Colonel Vasquez's life had been designed to prevent a coordinated attack against American diplomatic facilities throughout the region. Elena had spent 8 months infiltrating a terrorist cell that planned to use chemical weapons against embassy personnel in Damascus, Beirut, and Ankara simultaneously. Her intelligence had allowed preemptive strikes that eliminated the threat. But her cover had been compromised during the final phase of the mission when she chose to save 3 children, who had been used as human shields during the operation. Chen's investigation revealed that Elena's extraction from Syria had required a firefight that left 12 hostile combatants dead and her own identity completely burned within international terrorist networks. Her face had been distributed throughout extremist communication channels with bounties that would have made her the most hunted American operative in the Middle East. Returning to official military service would have been impossible without endangering every mission she might be assigned to and every operative who worked alongside her. The decision to declare Colonel Vasquez killed in action had been made at the highest levels of military intelligence, recognizing that her continued service would require complete erasure of her official identity and deployment under non-official cover that provided no protection if her activities were discovered. Elena had volunteered for the transition, understanding that she was choosing permanent exile from the military career that had defined her life. Since graduating from West Point 15 years earlier, her new identity as a classical pianist had been constructed through a process that required 3 years of intensive preparation and training. Elena had indeed attended Northwestern State University, but as part of an intelligence program that taught operatives to establish credible civilian covers that would withstand comprehensive background investigation. Her musical abilities had been developed specifically to support intelligence gathering in diplomatic and cultural settings where traditional surveillance would be impossible. The embassy assignment had been Elena's first operational deployment under her new identity, designed to test whether she could maintain effective intelligence gathering while appearing to function as a normal civilian employee. Her success had exceeded all expectations, with intelligence reports crediting her network with preventing more security threats than any other single asset in the diplomatic protection program. Her musical performances had provided perfect cover for activities that saved lives throughout the region while maintaining complete operational security. Elena's communication with sniper teams had been developed during her military service, where she had specialized in coordinating between intelligence assets and tactical support elements during high-risk operations. Her ability to encode targeting information within musical compositions had been refined through years of experience transmitting critical intelligence under conditions where traditional communication methods would have resulted in immediate discovery and execution. The precision required to coordinate lethal force through artistic performance represented skills that few operatives ever mastered. The network Elena had established around the embassy represented the culmination of everything she had learned during 15 years of covert operations. Each member had been carefully recruited and trained without fully understanding their participation in intelligence activities, creating a surveillance system that could operate indefinitely without requiring official support or authorization. The musicians, servers, and maintenance workers who provided information believed they were simply being helpful to a colleague. who appreciated their observations about unusual activities in their workplace. Chen's investigation revealed that Elena's apartment had served as a communication center for intelligence operations throughout the region, with equipment hidden within musical instruments that could monitor electromagnetic emissions from embassy buildings throughout the diplomatic quarter. Her piano had been modified to function as a sophisticated signal processing center, analyzing radio communications and electronic surveillance attempts while appearing to be nothing more than a musician's primary instrument. The most shocking revelation emerged from classified medical records that documented the physical and psychological toll of Elena's years undercover within terrorist organizations. She had been tortured multiple times during missions where her cover had been questioned, bearing scars that were hidden beneath her conservative clothing choices. Psychological evaluations revealed symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress that had been managed through therapy sessions disguised as music lessons with a psychiatrist who specialized in treating deep cover operatives. Elena's sacrifice extended beyond personal safety to include relationships and connections that made normal life impossible. Her family believed she had died in Syria, attending a funeral where an empty coffin had been buried with full military honors while she watched from a distance, unable to comfort her grieving parents or explain why she had chosen duty over personal happiness. Every relationship since had been constrained by the need to maintain her cover identity, preventing the intimate connections that might have provided emotional support during the most difficult assignments. The financial records Chen discovered revealed that Elena had been donating significant portions of her embassy salary to families of military personnel killed in operations that had been based on intelligence she had provided. Her contributions were anonymous and channeled through charitable organizations that specialized in supporting Gold Star families, representing her way of honoring colleagues whose sacrifices had been recognized while hers remained forever classified. She lived with the knowledge that her greatest victories would never be acknowledged and her service would never be honored. Chen's investigation uncovered evidence that Elena's musical performances had been transmitting intelligence that prevented terrorist attacks against civilian targets throughout the region. Her network had identified and neutralized plots against schools, hospitals, and shopping centers that would have claimed hundreds of innocent lives. The success of these operations had been attributed to enhanced security awareness and international cooperation, never revealing that they depended on a former colonel's ability to encode life-saving intelligence within classical compositions. Psychological evaluation reports revealed that Elena's transition to civilian identity had been particularly difficult because it required suppressing the leadership instincts and tactical thinking that had made her successful as a military officer. Learning to appear ordinary and unremarkable had been more challenging than any combat mission, requiring constant vigilance to avoid behaviors that would suggest capabilities beyond those of a simple musician. Her performance as a modest pianist represented acting skills that rivaled any professional entertainer. Elena's continued service under civilian cover had been motivated by intelligence reports, indicating that her departure from active duty would create vulnerabilities that hostile forces would attempt to exploit. Her network provided defensive capabilities that could not be replicated through official channels without compromising operational security and revealing intelligence sources that had taken years to develop. She had chosen permanent exile from recognition rather than allow her retirement to endanger lives that depended on the protection her invisible service provided. The scope of Elena's sacrifice became clear when Chen discovered that she had been offered opportunities to return to official military service under different identities, but had refused because her embassy assignment provided unique access to intelligence that was critical for preventing attacks against diplomatic personnel throughout the region. Her decision to remain hidden represented a choice to prioritize mission success over personal advancement, accepting permanent obscurity to maintain capabilities that saved lives on a scale that would never be measured or acknowledged. Chen realized that the woman Hartwell had dismissed as a ceremonial appointment had sacrificed everything that defined her identity to continue serving her country in ways that required ultimate dedication to duty over personal recognition, maintaining vigilance that protected thousands of lives through invisible service that would never receive the honors it deserved. Chen's decision to confront Deputy Ambassador Hartwell required careful preparation and absolute certainty about the evidence he would present. The meeting was scheduled for early morning when the embassy operated with minimal staff, reducing the possibility that their conversation would be overheard by personnel who lacked appropriate security clearance for the information Chen needed to reveal. He arranged the classified documents in chronological order, creating a narrative that would demonstrate Elena's true identity and service record without allowing Hartwell to dismiss the evidence as speculation or misunderstanding. Hartwell entered his office with the confident stride of someone whose efficiency initiatives had gained recognition from State Department leadership, his recent success in eliminating redundant positions having established his reputation as a decisive administrator, capable of implementing necessary reforms. The morning briefing materials on his desk included budget projections showing savings achieved through personnel reductions, with Elena's eliminated position highlighted as an example of successful cost optimization that other diplomatic missions should emulate. Chen's opening statement was direct and calculated to immediately capture Hartwell's complete attention before he could dismiss the security chief's concerns as routine administrative matters. "Sir, I need to brief you on a critical security situation involving the pianist you terminated last week. Elena Vasquez is not who her personnel file indicates, and her dismissal has created vulnerabilities that hostile forces are already attempting to exploit." The formal tone and security classification language immediately shifted the conversation from administrative review to intelligence briefing. Hartwell's initial reaction combined irritation with confusion as he struggled to understand how a musician's termination could possibly constitute a security matter requiring immediate attention from embassy intelligence personnel. His corporate consulting background had taught him to view personnel decisions through financial analysis rather than operational security considerations, and Chen's assertion that Elena represented anything beyond a budget line item seemed to contradict everything Hartwell understood about diplomatic mission requirements and efficiency optimization. The first classified document Chen presented contained Elena's military service photograph alongside her embassy identification, the comparison making their identical identity unmistakable despite the dramatic difference in bearing and expression between the colonel in uniform and the modest pianist who had served background music during diplomatic receptions. Hartwell studied the images with growing disbelief, his confidence in his personnel assessment beginning to crack as Chen explained the significance of what he was observing. Chen's briefing methodically revealed Elena's operational history, beginning with her West Point graduation and progression through increasingly classified assignments that had taken her into the most dangerous theaters of the war on terrorism. Each classified mission summary demonstrated capabilities and achievements that were completely inconsistent with the simple musician Hartwell had dismissed as ceremonial window dressing. Her decorations included honors that could not be publicly acknowledged, recognizing service that had prevented catastrophic attacks against American interests throughout the Middle East. The revelation that Elena had been declared killed in action to protect her future deep cover operations struck Hartwell like a physical blow, forcing him to confront the reality that he had publicly humiliated someone who had sacrificed her official identity and military career to continue serving her country under conditions that provided no recognition or protection. Her transition to civilian cover had required abandoning everything that defined her professional identity, accepting permanent exile from the military community that had been her life for 15 years. Chen's presentation of intelligence reports documenting threats that Elena's network had neutralized during her embassy tenure demonstrated the scope of protection that Hartwell had unknowingly enjoyed while dismissing her as expendable overhead. 17 separate plots against embassy personnel had been identified and disrupted through intelligence gathered by her surveillance network, with several attempts specifically targeting senior diplomatic personnel who remained unaware that their survival depended on a pianist's ability to coordinate defensive measures through musical performances. The most devastating revelation emerged when Chen presented classified communications, intercepts indicating that Elena's network had prevented a sophisticated assassination attempt against Hartwell himself during his second week at the embassy. The attack had been planned by a terrorist cell that viewed his efficiency initiatives as preparation for expanded American diplomatic presence in the region, making him a high-value target whose elimination would demonstrate their capability to strike at will against embassy leadership. Elena's intelligence gathering had identified the plot during its planning phase, allowing her network to compromise the attackers' weapons and communication equipment while they prepared for their mission. The would-be assassins had been arrested by local security forces after their equipment malfunctioned during what they believed would be a simple operation against an unprotected target. Hartwell had never known that his life had been saved by the woman he would later dismiss as a luxury the embassy could not afford. Chen's documentation showed that Elena's musical performances during Hartwell's early weeks at the embassy had been encoding tactical information that positioned sniper teams and surveillance assets to provide comprehensive protection against threats that conventional security measures would have been unable to detect or counter. Her repertoire selection had corresponded directly to intelligence assessments about attack probabilities, with certain compositions serving as coded instructions for heightened defensive postures when threats were considered imminent. The investigation revealed that Elena's dismissal had immediately triggered increased probing activities by hostile intelligence services, who had been monitoring embassy security for weaknesses they could exploit. Her departure had created gaps in surveillance coverage that enemy operatives were already testing, with attempts to infiltrate embassy support services and establish observation posts that would have been impossible while her network remained operational. The correlation between her termination and escalating security threats could not be explained as coincidental. Hartwell's review of embassy security reports from the previous month revealed a pattern of incidents that had been attributed to enhanced vigilance and professional competence, but actually resulted from Elena's network identifying and neutralizing potential threats before they could develop into serious dangers. Vehicle inspections that discovered concealed explosives, personnel screenings that identified individuals with falsified credentials, and equipment malfunctions that prevented surveillance attempts had all been coordinated through intelligence that Elena had gathered and transmitted through her musical performances. Chen presented evidence that Elena had continued her protective mission even after termination from embassy employment, establishing new performance venues throughout the diplomatic corridor that maintained surveillance capabilities while appearing to pursue normal career opportunities as a freelance musician. Her network had adapted to operate under even more sophisticated cover arrangements, suggesting that she had anticipated her dismissal and prepared contingency plans that would allow continued protection of embassy personnel regardless of her official employment status. The scope of Hartwell's misjudgment became clear as Chen demonstrated that Elena's apparent cooperation during her termination had actually been a performance designed to protect operational security while transitioning to non-official cover. Her graceful acceptance of dismissal had concealed the implementation of protocols that maintained intelligence gathering capabilities through alternative channels that were even more difficult for hostile forces to detect or counter. Her professionalism during the humiliating public termination had been another example of the acting skills that had kept her alive during years of deep cover operations. Hartwell's attempt to understand the implications of Chen's briefing led to questions about Elena's current activities and whether her network could be officially restored through administrative procedures that would bring her back under embassy employment. Chen's response revealed that Elena had declined multiple offers to return to her position, insisting that her unofficial status provided operational advantages that would be compromised by renewed official recognition. Her choice to remain invisible represented a decision to prioritize mission effectiveness over personal vindication. The revelation that Elena's service continued despite receiving no compensation, beyond the modest fees earned through her freelance musical performances, highlighted the depth of her commitment to protecting lives that would never know they had been in danger. Her financial sacrifice complemented the personal costs of maintaining an identity that prevented normal relationships and required constant vigilance to avoid behaviors that might compromise her cover. Every aspect of her civilian life remained subordinated to mission requirements that had no official recognition or support. Chen's final piece of evidence documented Elena's role in training embassy security personnel through methods that appeared to be routine professional development, but actually taught advanced threat detection and response techniques disguised as standard security protocols. Her influence had improved embassy defensive capabilities while ensuring that her departure would not completely eliminate the protective measures she had established. The security improvements that Hartwell had credited to professional competence were actually the result of Elena's invisible mentorship. Hartwell's realization that he had eliminated the embassy's most valuable security asset while publicly humiliating someone whose service record exceeded that of any diplomat he had ever encountered forced him to confront the complete inadequacy of his efficiency assessment methods and the dangerous consequences of reducing human value to budget line items and organizational charts. Hartwell's desperate attempt to locate Elena and offer reinstatement led him through a maze of performance venues throughout the diplomatic corridor, each venue revealing another layer of the sophisticated network she had constructed while appearing to simply seek employment as a freelance musician. Her schedule included performances at hotels where foreign delegations stayed, restaurants where diplomats conducted informal meetings, and cultural centers where embassy personnel attended social events. Every location provided optimal surveillance opportunities disguised as artistic engagement with the international community. The Deputy Ambassador's search culminated at the Meridian Hotel's evening concert series, where Elena performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 for an audience that included embassy staff, foreign diplomats, and intelligence operatives who had no idea they were listening to one of the most decorated covert agents in American history. Her technical mastery of the challenging composition was matched by the subtle communication protocols embedded within her performance, transmitting real-time intelligence assessments to assets positioned throughout the audience. Elena's response to Hartwell's private meeting request was delivered through a hotel concierge, who handed him a handwritten note specifying a location and time for their conversation. The message was written in elegant script that revealed her classical education while containing subtle markings that would convey additional information to anyone trained to read between the lines. Her choice of meeting location demonstrated tactical thinking, selecting a public space with multiple exit routes and sight lines that would allow her to control the encounter completely. Their conversation took place in the hotel's garden courtyard, where Elena's positioning allowed her to monitor approaches while appearing to enjoy the evening air during a break between performances. Hartwell's offer to restore her embassy position and provide whatever recognition was possible within security constraints was met with polite but firm refusal that revealed her complete understanding of the strategic situation. Her current status provided operational advantages that official reinstatement would compromise, making her more valuable to embassy security as an invisible guardian than as a recognized employee. Elena's explanation of her choice to remain unofficial centered on the network's evolution beyond simple intelligence gathering into active threat prevention that required flexibility, impossible under official diplomatic protocols. Her musicians, servers, and maintenance contacts throughout the district had become an early warning system that could identify and neutralize, developing threats before conventional security measures would even detect their existence. The network operated continuously without bureaucratic oversight or administrative delays that might prevent rapid response to urgent situations. The scope of Elena's current mission became clear as she described operations that extended far beyond embassy protection to include safeguarding American interests throughout the region through coordination with similar networks in other diplomatic centers. Her musical communication protocols had been adapted by operatives in embassies across 3 continents, creating an intelligence sharing system that operated independently of official channels while providing information that enhanced conventional security measures. The network had become self-sustaining and self-expanding, recruiting new members through natural interaction rather than formal training programs. Elena's training methods had evolved to include embassy personnel who believed they were receiving professional development and security awareness but were actually learning advanced surveillance techniques disguised as routine protocol enhancement. Security guards learned to read behavioral patterns that indicated hostile intent. Administrative staff developed skills for detecting social engineering attempts, and maintenance workers acquired knowledge for identifying unauthorized electronic surveillance equipment hidden within embassy infrastructure. The mathematical precision of Elena's network became apparent as she explained how musical notation served as a universal language for encoding tactical information that could be transmitted across cultural and linguistic barriers without detection. Her system had been adopted by intelligence operatives whose covers required them to function as artists, teachers, or cultural workers in diplomatic communities where traditional communication methods would attract unwanted attention. The protocols she had developed were being taught at training facilities that officially did not exist, preparing operatives for deep cover assignments that would protect American interests for decades. Elena's influence extended to technological innovations that emerged from her unique combination of musical expertise and operational experience. Signal processing techniques developed to hide communication within musical performances had been adapted for secure military communications, while acoustic surveillance methods she had pioneered were being implemented to protect critical infrastructure from terrorist reconnaissance. Her contributions to national security continued through technical innovation that bore no official connection to her service record. The personal cost of Elena's choice was evident in her isolated existence, maintaining relationships that could never develop beyond professional networking because intimate connections would compromise operational security. Her apartment remained a temporary staging area rather than a home, with personal possessions limited to items that supported her cover identity. Every friendship was constrained by the need to conceal capabilities and knowledge that could not be explained within her official background, creating emotional isolation that was the price of continued service. Elena's financial arrangements reflected her commitment to supporting families affected by operations she had coordinated, with anonymous donations channeled through charitable organizations that aided children orphaned by terrorist attacks her intelligence had helped prevent. Her modest lifestyle was supplemented by satisfaction in knowing that her invisible service allowed others to live safely, though the family she protected would never know their guardian's identity or understand the sacrifice that secured their peace. The network's recruitment methods had become so subtle that new members joined believing they were simply being helpful to colleagues who appreciated their observations about unusual activities in their workplace. Restaurant servers learned to notice dining patterns that might indicate surveillance. Hotel staff developed skills for identifying guests whose behavior suggested hostile intent. And taxi drivers acquired knowledge for recognizing routes that could be used for escape after terrorist attacks. Each member contributed to collective security, while believing their participation was informal and voluntary. Elena's legacy was measured in disasters that did not happen rather than victories that could be celebrated. With her greatest achievements remaining forever classified, while the lives she saved continued unaware of their debt to someone who chose obscurity over recognition. Intelligence analysts credited enhanced security awareness and international cooperation for threat prevention successes that actually depended on Elena's network detecting and neutralizing plots before they could develop into serious dangers. The expansion of Elena's model to other diplomatic missions had created a global network of invisible guardians who protected American interests through service that would never receive official acknowledgment. Former military personnel who had volunteered for similar identity transitions were establishing cultural cover identities that provided access to intelligence sources impossible for conventional operatives to penetrate. Musicians, artists, and cultural workers throughout the diplomatic community were contributing to national security while appearing to pursue normal civilian careers. Elena's training programs had evolved beyond tactical communication to include psychological preparation for operatives who would spend years maintaining cover identities that required suppressing their true capabilities and knowledge. Her experience transitioning from military leadership to civilian invisibility had become the foundation for instruction that helped others adapt to similar sacrifices. The techniques she had developed for managing the emotional challenges of invisible service were being taught to operatives preparing for assignments that would require ultimate dedication to duty over personal recognition. The evening's final performance included compositions that Elena had written herself, pieces that appeared to be original classical works, but actually served as comprehensive intelligence briefings for operatives positioned throughout the audience. Her musical legacy would outlive her operational career, with compositions that could transmit tactical information across generations of intelligence professionals who would adapt her methods to meet evolving threats against American security. Elena's choice to decline recognition and continue serving without acknowledgment represented the ultimate expression of military virtue, demonstrating that true heroism could flourish in complete darkness while lesser spirits required public appreciation. To sustain their commitment, her network would continue expanding and adapting long after her individual service ended, protecting lives through invisible dedication that proved the most effective guardians were those who needed no guardians themselves. The garden courtyard fell silent as Elena prepared to return to her performance, leaving Hartwell with the knowledge that he had encountered someone whose service transcended every conventional measure of military excellence while remaining forever hidden from the recognition such dedication deserved. 6 months after Elena's final conversation with Hartwell, intelligence reports from diplomatic missions across 4 continents documented a dramatic decrease in successful terrorist reconnaissance operations against American facilities. The pattern was so consistent that analysts began investigating whether hostile organizations had shifted their strategic focus away from embassy targets, unaware that they were documenting the expansion of Elena's network into a global protective system that operated beyond any official intelligence framework. The training materials Elena had developed for embassy security personnel were being quietly distributed through professional development programs that appeared to focus on routine protocol enhancement, but actually taught advanced threat detection techniques disguised as standard security awareness education. Security guards at American facilities from Bangkok to Berlin were learning to read behavioral patterns that indicated hostile surveillance, while administrative staff acquired skills for identifying social engineering attempts that could compromise classified information or operational security. Elena's musical communication protocols had been adapted by intelligence operatives whose covers required them to function as cultural workers in diplomatic communities where traditional communication methods would attract attention from hostile surveillance teams. A violinist at the American consulate in Istanbul was coordinating protective measures for visiting officials through performances that encoded tactical information within classical compositions, while a piano teacher in the embassy district of Vienna had established a surveillance network among her students who reported unusual activities they observed during their daily routines. The effectiveness of Elena's methods became apparent when several major terrorist plots were disrupted through intelligence that could not be traced to any official source, with investigations revealing only that alert citizens had noticed suspicious activities and reported them through proper channels. The true source of these discoveries was a network of cultural workers, service industry employees, and maintenance personnel who had been trained to recognize threat indicators, while believing their observations were simply helpful contributions to community safety. Elena's influence extended to technological innovations that emerged from defense contractors, who had received classified briefings on acoustic surveillance techniques she had pioneered during her embassy assignment. Signal processing equipment designed to detect communications hidden within musical performances was being deployed at critical infrastructure sites, while software programs based on her encryption methods were protecting military communications. Systems from interception by hostile intelligence services, the recruitment methods Elena had developed were being implemented by intelligence services that recognized the value of building protective networks among civilian populations who could provide early warning about developing threats. Restaurant workers in diplomatic districts were learning to notice dining patterns that might indicate surveillance operations. Hotel staff were developing skills for identifying guests whose behavior suggested hostile intent. And taxi drivers were acquiring knowledge for recognizing escape routes that could be used after terrorist attacks. Elena's personal sacrifice had inspired similar transitions among military personnel who volunteered for deep cover assignments that required abandoning their official identities to continue serving under civilian covers that provided access to intelligence sources impossible for conventional operatives to penetrate. Former Special Forces operators were establishing businesses that allowed them to monitor potential threats while appearing to pursue normal entrepreneurial activities, while retired intelligence analysts were accepting positions as teachers and researchers that provided legitimate reasons for maintaining contact with foreign nationals who might possess valuable information. The psychological preparation techniques Elena had developed for managing the emotional challenges of invisible service were being taught at training facilities that officially did not exist, helping operatives adapt to assignments that would require years of maintaining cover identities while suppressing their true capabilities and knowledge. Her methods for dealing with isolation and the inability to form intimate relationships had become essential curriculum for professionals whose effectiveness depended on remaining unknown and unrecognized. Elena's musical compositions had evolved into a sophisticated communication system that allowed operatives throughout the diplomatic community to share intelligence without using traditional channels that might be monitored by hostile services. Concert programs at cultural events included pieces that transmitted tactical information to audience members trained to decode the embedded messages, while recording sessions produced albums that served as intelligence briefings for operatives who could not meet in person without compromising their covers. The global expansion of Elena's network had created redundant, protective systems that could continue operating even if individual members were discovered or eliminated by hostile forces. Intelligence analysts noted that terrorist organizations were experiencing unprecedented difficulty in conducting reconnaissance operations against American facilities, with their operatives reporting equipment malfunctions, surveillance detection, and mission failures that appeared to result from exceptional security awareness rather than specific countermeasures. Elena's training programs had evolved to include family members of embassy personnel who learned to contribute to security awareness, while believing they were simply being helpful members of the diplomatic community. Spouses attending social events were taught to notice behavioral patterns that might indicate intelligence gathering attempts, while children were educated about recognizing strangers who showed an unusual interest in their daily routines or asked inappropriate questions about their parents' work. The financial networks Elena had established for supporting families affected by terrorism were expanding to include educational programs that taught threat awareness to civilian populations in regions where American interests might be targeted. Her anonymous contributions funded security training for teachers, healthcare workers, and community leaders who could identify potential threats while continuing their normal professional activities without appearing to function as intelligence assets. Elena's legacy extended to architectural and urban planning innovations that incorporated her insights about acoustic surveillance and communication security into the design of new embassy buildings and diplomatic facilities. Construction projects included features that would facilitate her musical communication methods while preventing hostile forces from using similar techniques for espionage purposes. The buildings themselves became part of the protective network, designed to support covert operations while appearing to prioritize cultural sophistication and diplomatic hospitality. The network's evolution had reached a point where it operated independently of Elena's direct supervision, with members training new recruits through natural interaction rather than formal instruction programs. Restaurant servers who had learned to recognize suspicious behavior were teaching similar skills to new employees, while maintenance workers were sharing threat detection techniques with colleagues who believed they were receiving general safety education rather than counterintelligence training. Elena's influence on intelligence doctrine had revolutionized approaches to protective security by demonstrating that the most effective defensive measures were those that appeared to be cultural or social activities rather than security operations. Her methods were being studied at war colleges and intelligence training facilities. Though her identity remained classified and her techniques were presented as theoretical concepts rather than proven methodologies developed through operational experience, the most significant measure of Elena's success was found in statistics that would never be compiled or published, documenting terrorist attacks that were planned but never executed, reconnaissance operations that failed for unexplained reasons, and intelligence gathering attempts that were detected and neutralized before reaching dangerous levels. Her network had created a protective environment where American interests were safer, precisely because the protection remained invisible to both hostile forces and the people being protected. Elena's continued service, under increasingly sophisticated cover arrangements, had established her as a legendary figure within intelligence communities that recognized her contributions while maintaining the operational security that made her effectiveness possible. Young operatives preparing for similar assignments studied her methods through case studies that referred to her only as the Pianist, understanding that her techniques had become the foundation for a new generation of invisible guardians who would protect American interests through service that would never receive public recognition. The transformation of threat patterns throughout the diplomatic community reflected Elena's success in creating a protective system that adapted and evolved to meet changing security challenges while remaining completely hidden from the people whose lives depended on its effectiveness. Her invisible service had become the model for a new kind of heroism that measured success in disasters prevented rather than victories celebrated, demonstrating that the most powerful weapons against terrorism were dedication, intelligence, and the willingness to serve without recognition in defense of those who would never know their guardian's name. 2 years after Elena's transition to complete unofficial status, the Meridian Hotel's Grand Ballroom hosted a reception for visiting European Union trade representatives. Their conversations about economic partnerships, providing cover for intelligence exchanges that would have been impossible through official diplomatic channels. Elena's performance of Mozart's Piano Sonata No. 11 created an elegant atmosphere while simultaneously transmitting tactical coordinates that positioned protective assets throughout the building, each note carefully calculated to provide information That could save lives if the evening's festivities were interrupted by hostile action. The threat materialized at precisely 9:47 p.m. when Elena's acoustic surveillance detected the distinctive electromagnetic signature of remote detonation equipment being activated in the hotel's parking structure. Her performance shifted seamlessly from Mozart to an original composition that appeared to be an improvised jazz interpretation, but actually transmitted emergency protocols to 17 different assets positioned throughout the building and surrounding district. Within 30 seconds, evacuation procedures had begun disguised as a routine fire safety inspection that cleared the danger zone without creating panic among the diplomatic guests. Chen, now promoted to regional security coordinator following his investigation of Elena's network, monitored the situation from his position near the ballroom's eastern exit while maintaining radio contact with explosive ordnance disposal teams that had been pre-positioned based on Elena's threat assessment. From earlier in the evening, her intelligence gathering had identified the attack during its planning phase, allowing countermeasures to be implemented before the terrorists realized their operation had been compromised. Through sources they could never imagine existed, the explosive device was neutralized by technicians who reached the parking structure through service corridors that Elena had mapped during her reconnaissance of the building's acoustic properties 6 months earlier. Her preparation had included identifying optimal routes for emergency response that would avoid areas where terrorist surveillance might detect unusual security activity. The bomb disposal was completed while the diplomatic reception continued upstairs, with guests never knowing that their lives had been saved by a pianist's ability to coordinate defensive measures through musical performance. Elena's network had evolved to include the hotel's entire service staff, from valet attendants who noticed suspicious vehicle modifications to housekeeping personnel who recognized unusual electronic equipment during routine room maintenance. The head chef had been trained to identify chemical residues that might indicate bomb-making activities, while the concierge staff possessed skills for detecting fake identification documents and behavioral patterns that suggested hostile intent. Each employee contributed to collective security while believing their vigilance was simply professional dedication to guest safety. The terrorists responsible for the failed attack were arrested by local police who received anonymous tips about individuals behaving suspiciously near the hotel, never understanding that their movements had been tracked by Elena's surveillance network from the moment they entered the diplomatic district. The investigation would reveal evidence of a sophisticated plot to eliminate key trade negotiators whose deaths would have destabilized economic relationships between the United States and European allies. But the true source of the intelligence that prevented the catastrophe would remain forever classified. Elena's continued development of communication protocols had progressed beyond musical performance to include artistic techniques that could transmit tactical information through visual media displayed in embassy buildings and diplomatic facilities. Paintings hung in reception areas contained geometric patterns that conveyed threat assessment data to trained observers, while floral arrangements in embassy lobbies were designed according to specifications that indicated current security postures and operational requirements. Even architectural features like lighting and furniture placement served dual purposes, creating beautiful spaces while facilitating covert communication. The recruitment methods Elena had pioneered were being implemented by intelligence services worldwide, with cultural workers and service industry employees throughout diplomatic communities receiving training that prepared them to contribute to security awareness while maintaining their civilian identities and professional responsibilities. Music teachers in embassy districts were learning to recognize students whose questions suggested intelligence gathering rather than artistic interest, while restaurant staff acquired skills for identifying conversations that might indicate terrorist planning or espionage activities. Elena's influence extended to educational institutions that specialized in training intelligence operatives for deep cover assignments. requiring cultural expertise and artistic abilities. Conservatories and art schools unknowingly hosted programs that taught students to embed communication protocols within their creative work, while language institutes provided instruction in techniques for encoding tactical information within translation and interpretation services. The next generation of invisible guardians was being prepared through curricula that appeared to focus on cultural sophistication rather than national security applications. The psychological support systems Elena had developed for operatives, managing the emotional challenges of invisible service, had become essential resources for intelligence professionals whose effectiveness depended on maintaining cover identities that prevented normal relationships and social connections. Support groups disguised as artistic collaboratives provided opportunities for operatives to share experiences and coping strategies without compromising operational security, while mentorship programs connected experienced deep cover agents with newcomers who needed guidance for adapting to lives that would never receive public recognition or appreciation. Elena's financial networks had expanded to include business enterprises that generated revenue for continued operations while providing legitimate employment opportunities for operatives transitioning from military service to civilian covers. Investment portfolios managed through charitable foundations funded community programs that enhanced security awareness while appearing to focus on cultural education and social welfare. The economic infrastructure supporting invisible service had become self-sustaining and capable of expansion without requiring official budget allocations or administrative oversight. The technological innovations emerging from Elena's acoustic surveillance techniques were being incorporated into security systems, protecting critical infrastructure throughout the United States and allied nations. Detection equipment based on her signal processing methods could identify communications hidden within apparently innocent audio transmissions, while monitoring software derived from her encryption protocols protected sensitive government communications from interception by hostile intelligence services. Her technical contributions to national security continued through innovations that bore no official connection to her service record. Elena's training materials had become foundation texts for intelligence education programs that prepared operatives for assignments requiring cultural sophistication and artistic abilities. Her techniques for maintaining operational security while functioning as a civilian professional were being taught to students who would spend their careers protecting American interests through service that would never appear in official records or receive public acknowledgment. The methods she had developed through personal experience were now institutional knowledge that would influence intelligence operations. For generations, the global network Elena had inspired was adapting to address emerging threats that required new forms of invisible protection, with operatives establishing covers as technology workers, environmental scientists, and social media influencers who could monitor developing dangers while appearing to pursue normal career opportunities. Her model of service without recognition had become the template for a new generation of guardians, whose effectiveness depended on remaining unknown to both hostile forces and the people they protected. Elena's evening performance concluded with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she had chosen to signal that all threats had been neutralized and normal security posture could resume throughout the district. Her audience of diplomats and trade representatives applauded politely, appreciating her technical skill while remaining unaware that they owed their lives to someone whose greatest achievements would never be celebrated or acknowledged. Their safe return to their hotels that evening was guaranteed by protection they would never recognize or understand. The hotel's service staff completed their evening routines according to schedules that appeared routine, but actually included security verification procedures Elena had taught them to perform without realizing their contribution to threat prevention. Parking attendants checked vehicles for modifications that might indicate hostile use, while cleaning personnel monitored for evidence of surveillance equipment or unusual activities that could suggest terrorist reconnaissance. Each task was completed as part of normal employment responsibilities while contributing to collective security that operated continuously and invisibly. Elena gathered her sheet music and prepared to leave the Meridian Hotel, her evening's work complete, but her mission continuing through networks that would operate throughout the night and into the following day. Her apartment remained a temporary staging area rather than a permanent home, furnished with possessions that supported her cover identity while concealing equipment and resources necessary for coordination of protective operations that spanned multiple continents and time zones. The city's diplomatic quarters settled into its nighttime rhythm under protection that remained invisible to residents and visitors who slept safely because someone had chosen service over recognition, duty over comfort, and invisible dedication over visible glory. Elena's guardian network maintained vigilance that would continue until dawn, brought new threats that would be detected, assessed, and neutralized by people whose heroism flourished in complete darkness, requiring no recognition beyond the knowledge that their invisible service kept the world safer for those who would never know their names. 5 years later, Elena Vasquez performed her final concert at the Meridian Hotel. Her retirement from active service marked only by the subtle transition of network leadership to operatives she had trained to continue the invisible mission that protected diplomatic communities across the globe. Her farewell piece was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, each note carrying encoded instructions for maintaining the surveillance systems and communication protocols that would outlive her individual service while adapting to meet evolving threats against American interests. The audience that evening included Chen, now serving as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy, and several other officials who understood the true significance of Elena's departure from the diplomatic community. Their applause was restrained and professional, appropriate for appreciating a talented musician's career transition, while concealing their knowledge that they were witnessing the end of an era in which one person's dedication had revolutionized protective security through methods that would never appear in official histories or operational manuals. As Elena's fingers lifted from the piano keys for the final time in her operational career, a young woman in the audience caught her attention. Maria Santos, a recently hired embassy custodian, had been watching Elena's performances with unusual intensity for several weeks. Her background check revealed nothing more interesting than a degree in international relations and fluency in 4 languages. But Elena's trained eye recognized the subtle signs of someone whose capabilities exceeded their official position. After the concert, Elena approached Maria with the casual interest of a retiring musician offering encouragement to someone who appreciated classical performance. Their conversation appeared to focus on musical technique and career advice, but Elena was actually conducting an assessment that would determine whether Maria possessed the qualities necessary for recruitment into the network that protected lives through invisible service. The young woman's responses revealed intelligence, dedication, and most importantly, the ability to notice details that others missed while maintaining perfect discretion. Elena's legacy would continue through people like Maria, who represented the next generation of invisible guardians, willing to sacrifice recognition for the greater good. The network Elena had created had become self-sustaining, recruiting new members through natural interaction rather than formal training programs. Restaurant servers who had learned to recognize suspicious behavior were teaching similar skills to new employees, while maintenance workers shared threat detection techniques with colleagues who believed they were receiving general safety education rather than counterintelligence training. The transformation Elena had undergone from decorated military officer to invisible civilian protector was now being replicated by hundreds of operatives worldwide who had chosen service over self-promotion. Former Special Forces operators established businesses that allowed them to monitor potential threats while appearing to pursue normal entrepreneurial activities. while retired intelligence analysts accepted positions as teachers and researchers that provided legitimate reasons for maintaining contact with foreign nationals who might possess valuable information. Elena's apartment was eventually cleared by professionals who understood that some possessions could never be donated or discarded through normal procedures, her personal effects reflecting a life dedicated to service that had required sacrificing everything that defined individual identity. Her piano was donated to a music school where students would learn classical technique without ever knowing that their instrument had once transmitted intelligence that saved thousands of lives through performances that looked like entertainment. While functioning as strategic communication, without the statistical evidence of Elena's success would never be compiled in any official report, but intelligence analysts throughout the intelligence community recognized the dramatic decrease in successful terrorist operations against American diplomatic facilities worldwide. Hostile organizations had shifted their strategic focus away from embassy targets without understanding that they were responding to a protective system that operated beyond any conventional security framework, making their traditional reconnaissance and attack methods ineffective against facilities that appeared vulnerable but were actually defended by networks they could never detect or penetrate. Elena's story concluded not with public recognition or ceremonial honors, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her invisible service had created a lasting legacy of protection that would continue long after her individual contribution ended. She had chosen to become nobody so that everybody else could remain somebody, demonstrating that the greatest heroes often serve in complete darkness, while requiring no acknowledgment beyond the knowledge that their dedication makes the world safer for people who will never know their guardian's name. The most powerful heroes among us often remain invisible, working quietly to keep communities safe while asking for nothing beyond the satisfaction of knowing their efforts matter. Elena Vasquez chose to serve without seeking credit, demonstrating that true heroism doesn't require recognition, applause, or public acknowledgement. Her story reminds us that extraordinary people walk among us every day, protecting and serving through dedication that flourishes in darkness while requiring no spotlight to sustain its power. If Elena's incredible story of invisible service and quiet heroism moved you, please hit that subscribe button and help us share these remarkable tales of courage that go unrecognized. What everyday heroes have you encountered in your own life? Have you ever wondered about the ordinary people around you who might be doing extraordinary things? Share their stories in the comments below, and don't forget to ring the notification bell to discover more incredible stories of service, sacrifice, and the remarkable individuals who choose duty over recognition, while making our world safer through their invisible dedication. Your support helps us bring these untold stories of heroism to light.